Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. We are going to dive straight into our guest and our program today because it's something that we are all, I would say, probably most of us are concerned about, and that's our health and wellness. We have a series of programs that we talk about health and wellness. We talk about thriving and looking for those new ways of living. Well, our very special guest today, Sevante, also known as the Food Oracle, is going to share with us insights into how we can take care of ourselves better as well as some interesting opportunities for you to participate in. We are also going to talk about her latest work, High Vibrational Wellness, Intuitive Healing Therapies to Nourish Your Body Temple. And Sevante, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program. It's great to have you with us.
Same. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
The subject, of course, I get some interesting commentary from different people in regards to, you know, our how well we take care of ourselves. One of the statistics I remember hearing was that in 1960 here in the United States, our obesity rate was 1%. And a little less than 60 years later, I'm 64 now, it's over 40%. It may even be higher than that. And you have to wonder, well, what in the Sam Hill went wrong over the last 60 years? I mean, I'm not overweight. I did reach 200 pounds. I didn't like the number. The weight didn't bother me as much as the number. I am not 200 pounds. And now I am hovering around 180, which is about my correct weight for height. But that's my story. I'm curious as to how you came to realize that this whole issue, and again, we're not just talking about food because we're talking about a whole, if I'm correct, a whole lifestyle that has to be evaluated. And it was like, okay, well, what am I doing? Not only what am I putting into my body in terms of food and drink, but what am I putting into my body of the other three senses in terms of how that's affecting me physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually. One of the things that I talk about in my book Choices is our personal input and how all of that affects the chemistry, which then that chemistry is used to run the body on all of the different levels. How did you find, what introduced you to this process?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that, by the way, because I share that same philosophy. I call it EMPS wellness, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. And we need to feed ourselves equally in balanced harmony with those four quadrants or areas of our being. And how did I get started is a long story, but I came from a very intuitive family, and I always grew up on a spiritual level doing oracle cards and tarot cards, and kind of went that sort of esoteric lifestyle. But a part of me was also very much here in the world, very scientific, and I ended up going to school many years ago for food science and dietetics. And as time went on in my career, I started to look at the consciousness of food, of those four areas, and realizing it's so much more than what we put in our body. In fact, in the new book, High Vibrational Wellness, that original title was High Vibrational Eating. And I thought to myself for a while, I was going to gather all these wonderful people to talk about their stories in addition to mine on how to feed ourselves well and what kind of diets and how to pray over your food and all the different ways. And I realized in that moment, it's not a cookbook, it's a divine book of 25 different ways to feed the body temple. But I also realized how important it was to feed our soul, to feed our thoughts, to feed all the parts of us. And so this had been a passion of mine for many years as a food healer. And then when I got the notion about 5 years ago, I decided, working with somebody else who was also very much passionate about the consciousness of food, to turn it into a platform and understand that there are heavenly messages, there are, call it spirit, there is a consciousness to what we're putting in this body that is housing our soul. So what I decided to do was make that information more well known and provide a little bit of a roadmap, a guide that will allow you to understand the colors, the textures, the reasons you're choosing, the reasons you're having cravings, the reasons that you are wanting to eat the foods that you're eating, and then find a way to help you use that as a guide for your health, for your wellness. And
I've
then
heard
here
it.
we are.
Yeah. And I've heard it said too in regards to cravings, that usually what that is telling you is your body is craving particular nutrients, not so much the actual food as much as the nutrients, because a lot of times the actual food that you are craving is not necessarily that good for you. Uh, one of my bugaboos, if you will, is over organic, using the term organic, and so forth, because, and I again, this is requesting your input on this. You can slap a label on anything and call it whatever you want. And here in California, we had a strawberry grower who, along the Central Coast, um, got nailed for putting organic on their packages of strawberries. And they were not organic. But how many people bought those strawberries thinking, oh, I'm getting the good stuff, the organic, And of course, 150 years ago, there was no such thing as organic because that's the way we grew our food. We didn't use pesticides and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, and I have some suggestions, but I'm curious as to your suggestions as to what we can do to make sure that what we're buying, if we can't go to the farmer's market, which we have 6 of them here in Santa Barbara County, and so forth, that offer, and again, they also have to be organic, and they're tested, they're checked. But how do we ensure that what if we want to talking about specifically here about what we take into our bodies in terms of food and drink, to make sure that we're getting nutrient rich elements that sustain the body, help the body heal properly, help the, I refer to the pharmaceutical company that we have within our bodies. But if we don't give that pharmaceutical company the right elements to create the chemicals, if you will, to keep our bodies balanced and make all of those things that we use, then we start to break down and we start to have the problems that we have, that are all over the place.
It's the fuel in the tank.
Fuel in the tank. Thank you.
Are you providing it, regular unleaded or supreme or premier, whatever you want to call it? And I don't know if there at this stage of the game is there 100% certainty unless you truly know who your supplier is. And being as close to local as in your own backyard, as in your own garden, would be the most secure, I believe, at this stage of development. But without ensuring that things are what they say they are, it's really hard. We hope that the organic process is with people that are actually certified. And yes, there's probably those ones like you said, and there's probably more than we know. But the more that we can hold people accountable, or the companies that we're purchasing from, the better. But I like to stay as close to nature as possible and as close to home. So if you can provide yourselves a little piece of land that will allow you, even if it's a small little garden bed at your property, it's just really nice to have your own, and you can actually taste the difference. It's just really nice to have that. Now, in terms of kind of going on an esoteric part of it, if you believe in raising the frequency, here we just came out with a book called HighVibrational Wellness, and we do many different ways to raise the consciousness of the food, including prayers and affirmations and putting prayer into the food. I am a big believer that what we put energetically into the food while you're preparing it, while you're eating it, before you eat it, whether it's whether you're a vegetarian or you're not, you want to give thanks to the food that has been provided for you. I think all of that plays a part in creating a vibrant state of eating in your body and wellness. And I think there's a lot to that in terms of thoughts. That's why people do affirmations. That's why people think positively. So we want to harmonize those positive thoughts in the food that is being now consumed in that pharmaceutical system, as you say, is that our body wants to respond to something high vibrational. Otherwise, it's going to attract low vibrational energies, and that's where we have that dis-ease and disharmony of the body breakdown.
Do you find that the conditions, some of the top conditions that we are facing as far as our health and wellness, um, unusual, or is it pretty typical? It's like, yeah, those are the diseases that would permeate our bodies because we're not giving it the right stuff. And I would put at the top that obesity is one element, but then you have high blood pressure, you have type 2 diabetes that you're not born with, that you acquire. That it's like we have the potentiality, as one guest once said, for all of these different conditions. That doesn't mean we're going to get them. It just means that we have the potentiality for them if we don't put the right fuel in, as you put it. uh,
Yeah, no,
it's kind of like, are we really surprised?
well, when you see a lot of those conditions, you also find that there's a lot of layers to that. And when I say that, I would first go to an emotional layer, emotional layers,
Mhm.
emotional, mental, even spiritual. And so if there's a disconnect in your consciousness, that presents challenges of all sorts. And if you have a disconnect in your emotional well-being, whether it's from a trauma or fears or whatever the worries, concerns, I mean, it can go on and on. Those play a role, and even fears that you didn't even know were yours from childhood or even past life, who knows.
Mm.
But a lot of those layers build, and we're talking, let's just say obesity layers, create this shield of protection around ourselves. And when we can start doing some of the healing work, and that's where I share a lot about that with my food healing oracle deck cards. You can actually pull a card, and it's not just, in my viewpoint, not just when we going back to what you said earlier about cravings, about yes, yes, that's one of them. Yes, our body needs a particular mineral, or it may need a particular vitamin. But I also think our body, our souls getting our attention and saying, this is what maybe our chakra system needs, or this is where we need to come back into balance. If we look at ourselves as nature, i.e., earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, and we are the embodiment. If we're very fiery, we need things to cool us down. And
Mm.
if we're so fiery, that can, maybe lead to conditions that create hypertension, that create, the heart attacks, that create that, overheat of the body. And so how can we create that? And there's colors that do that. There's foods that are those colors. So it's a whole ensemble of ways to listen to the clues.
Mhm.
That's why I teach intuitive food therapy. That is my teaching, is that if we can start to learn intuitively what our soul, our spirit's trying to tell us, a lot of those challenges start to really get addressed and looked at, not just by overeating, but the whys of what we're choosing. And so I
Yeah.
want you to go back to that sort of deeper inner work.
Sevante's my guest here on the program. She's the Food Oracle. Website is Center for IntuitiveFoodTherapy.com, or CFI,
CIF. You almost had
CIF,
CIFT.
CIFT. thedeeperofficial.com will be linked to that website so people can find out more about the work that you are doing, along with getting a copy of her book, High Vibrational Wellness Intuitive Healing Therapies. And we hope that you'll go to the website and pick up a copy as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're here with Sevante, the food oracle, and we're talking about, on the one hand, making sure that we put the right fuel in the machine, if you will, that we occupy. As some people obviously say, they'll say that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and the human experience is the body, and for a lot of different reasons. We are having these experiences, which we certainly can dive into as well. You're also the executive producer of a documentary. It's not available yet. You're working on it, called Hope from the Himalayas documentary, which to me is fascinating. And as of this conversation, you're headed off to work on that, traveling, I would say probably halfway around the world.
Yes, 22 hours, I believe my flight is tomorrow.
How exciting. How exciting to
Right?
be on a plane.
But it breaks up at 17 hours, and then I get an hour break and then another 4.
Well, at least you have a short little stint at the end there, which is very, very good. You
Right.
also host your own program. You're also the producer thereof, Nourish Your Soul show, as well as Nourish Your Soul Retreats, global sojourns into wellness. And certainly go to that website once again to find out more about the work that she is doing. Sevante is our guest here on the program. I want to dive into this further because we have those 3 or 4, depending upon how you divide it up, elements of who and what we are: the body, the mind, the emotions, the spirit, if you will. And when I was working in Phoenix, and interestingly enough, this was fascinating to me, that I met this woman at this Christian radio station I was working for. And I got to know her very well. And she taught me something about a technique that I know you're familiar with. It goes by many different names: muscle testing, but she referred to it as kinesiology. And she showed me how it worked. And I thought, okay. And she says, you can use this anywhere, for a situation. If you're in the grocery store trying to figure out what to buy, that's going to be okay for you, that kind of thing. A relationship, maybe. But at the same time, I also recognize that the information that I'm getting is for that moment, if you will, in time, that because the universe is in constant motion and everything's changing, in 10 minutes, I may get a different answer. But it's the body that's telling me what I need, what's in my best interest. I'm also a Reiki master, my wife as well. And we were trained in this particular art, that we don't control the energy that we are sending out. And we refer to it as healing energy, but I'm curious as to we'll talk about the kinesiology, but I'm curious as to your perspective, your definition, your awareness of what it is that we're really talking about when we're using the word healing. Because my wife and I gave my uncle an absentee healing. He had cancer. And following my uncle's funeral, my mother told me what happened shortly after we sent that energy to him. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Okay. We're not supposed to, we have no intent. Our job is just to send the energy and let the person do with it what they will. And he died. So where's the healing? And I guess it means that we have to change our perspective, our understanding about what healing for an individual really is.
I love that you brought this topic up. And my MO, or my standard response in everything I say, is for the highest good, or for the highest and best.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned a few things in there, but talking about what our body needs and talking about kinesiology and Reiki and sending energy and being energy and putting all the energy into our food and ourselves and our mind, body, and spirit. It's very power packed there. But what I would share is that we are this incredible being of light. We have a lot of energy that is in us. We have a lot of energy that can come through us. That's what channels do. They bring energy from the higher realms and be able to provide that. You are yourself are highly intuitive. Everybody is, as long as we learn to access it.
Mm.
I created in my chapter in the High Vibrational Wellness book a prayer, an affirmation, or an invocation, which settles you into the space of the now, of absolutely being present before you go shopping. I call it soul shopping. What does your body need now? And that could be not only for what does your body need now food wise, it could be emotional, mental, spiritual. But in terms of people who go on to pass, we have to be detached from any and all outcomes and allow ourselves just to be present in the knowing that when you bring forward a prayer or an affirmation or a Reiki or an energy, you're providing that without any bias. It's for the highest and best. And I come from multi-generational family of intuitives. My great grandmother was the town psychic in Russia, and let's see, my mother was a pet healer. And so if the pet was meant to stay here, she always was so successful in putting her hands on these pets or doing her own pet Reiki, if you will. She didn't call it that, but her own sense of healing, and allowing that spirit to either soar here and stay on the planet longer or move on. And so she wasn't guaranteeing an outcome. She just allowed that spirit of that animal to choose its destiny and its path and its dharma. And so I think that there's something to say about all of those pieces. I do use something, I call it the human pendulum, and that allows ourselves to be that barometer where we can actually stand in front of whether it's something at the store or a relationship, like you said, or should I move to the Isles of Trinidad or stay in California, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually choose that by just being a barometer inside and allowing yourself. In fact, I have a blog on my website. Anyone's welcome to go see it and read it. And I give several different ways to tune into your body, including this technique of being a body pendulum, where your body can actually tell you swaying forward or swaying backwards, a yes or a no. And it's highly effective. And you just want to make sure you're hydrated. But I talk about that all in the blog, and I welcome you to anybody to go read it. But yes, we have to be, if we were cut off from communication, we didn't have electronics. I know this wholeheartedly because where I live, we just came through a hurricane, actually a couple of them. When electronics are down and you can't reach your neighbor and you only have you, it's time to learn the beautiful tools you've been given, and that is on all levels, on that emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual, and tune in to see what's your next best course of action, including, do I stay or do I evacuate? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
real world things that have just occurred here that people are learning to implement for themselves. You have to trust your gut on everything.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and again, I can understand it because we live in California, of course, with high fire danger and so forth, and I've been a part of some programs where they talk about not if but when disaster strikes, that kind of thing,
Right.
and that depending upon the disaster or the event, if you will, the powers that be, the first responders, they may not be able to get to you right away.
Oh,
And
yes.
so, as long as you and your loved ones are okay, everybody is safe, you need to figure out what you're going to do to get yourself away from dangerous areas, that kind of thing, and get to safety, and so forth and so on. And so when I hear after these kinds of events take place. And I remember, of course, with Hurricane Katrina that hit Louisiana some almost, wow, 30 years ago. Whew. Um, I take that back, 20 years ago. Um, I kept hearing these cries for help, 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 help. Okay, I understand that. And they're stuck and so forth, and I get it. But what are you doing to help yourself?
Mm.
And I understand too about the logistics and the economics, and that a lot of people couldn't leave because they didn't have the resources to leave, and on and on. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why. And then there are those people who choose to stay in harm's way. And I have to wonder, especially when it comes to taking care of the whole body, the holistic body, um, sometimes we're doing the same thing. We know that we shouldn't eat that or drink that, or we shouldn't go over there or go over here. I don't think I would ever go anywhere near 3 Mile Island or Love Canal or some of these other toxic places on the planet. Um, just because it wouldn't be safe for the physical body, let alone how it would then impact my mental, emotional, and spiritual person. Do you find more and more people are beginning to realize that they, as an individual, need to become not only aware, but self reliant and responsible for their lives, that it is not up to some outside entity to take care of them?
100%. And it also goes to look at, just take a situation where you are in a compromised position, is to look at what are you choosing. Like, you hear people go to, like, going back to the cravings, you look at, are we choosing things from the outer aisles, which
Mm,
are for the body,
hmm.
which are healthy, which are more bioavailable, which are going to sustain you, which are going to keep you the healthiest? Or are you going to go for those cravings, which sometimes are not so good for you, but it's that comfort food, or everything in the inner aisle, which is processed, which hydrogenated, which have ingredients you can't even pronounce, and it's this long. And so it's really interesting to see how people make the choices. For me, I like to fortify as best as possible because I believe I'm going to need that strength. I'm going to need to be grounded and rooted. So I'm looking for things that are going to keep me healthy. I'll look for carrots or rooted vegetables or things that keep me where I can feel that I am anchored stronger into the planet, versus in my head where a lot of the air element or the mindset or the emotional mental can lead you in really panic directions. And this is just not just in trauma situations, or these situations were horrific weather events. This is just in everyday life. Are
Hmm.
we choosing things that are going to ground us before we have that conversation with our boss for the promotion, or are we choosing foods that are not going to serve us for the long haul? And those are all the choices we have to make. But there are challenges that come when we stay in the inner aisles for the long term, and
Yep.
that's what leads to the disharmony of the body. Our bodies don't understand those long chemicals that were made in the lab. They understand what Mother Nature intended us to have. That's why the foods look like the organs. And if we're looking at eyes, we look at blueberries and carrots, and walnuts, we look at brain, and we look at hearts, we look at a red bell pepper. We look at foods, the clues have been given there, and they're one ingredient filled
Yeah.
with millions of different wonderful vitamins and minerals. And I think that's what we need to look at as our medicine. And we don't need a first responder to tell us that. We should be our own first responder.
Right. We're talking with Sevante, and we're talking about the work that she's doing, the book she has, High Vibrational Wellness, Intuitive Healing, Healing Therapies to Nourish Your Body Temple. And we have a website as well. We encourage you to go to. We will be linked to it to make it easy for you folks. But the website is Center for Intuitive Food therapy.com, CIFT official.com. We certainly will link there. And so you folks can get more information as well as get a copy through, I'm sure, Amazon as well. And I always
Yeah.
ask this question of my guests regarding their books. Although some of the books have more pictures than they do content or text, I'm curious as to whether your book is available on Audible or if it's suited for an Audible format.
We actually are in production right now for our Audible. So
Oh.
that is in the middle of, we have our voiceover artists or VO artists in the middle of reading our chapters. So yes, there's 25 chapters. So it's going to be probably 9 hours easily. It's a lot of content. And the way the book is broken up, it's very simple. There's 25 stories from 25 people, including mine, intros and conclusions and such, and why I decided to put this book together. But people will leave with 25 different ways to nourish your body temple. And not only is it the story of what people have gone through, and they've all had a different story to share, but they're also sharing a tool, a healing technique, an intuitive therapy at the end of their chapters. So you don't have to go and buy something else or do anything else, but just read what they've written in their tool on these 25 chapters, and you will walk away fully more expanded and enlightened on all levels. I always say you'll never look at food the same way again, but you'll never look at lots of things the same way again, because you've now been brought 25 new ways to look at your own body and how you are relating to it.
Sevante is my guest. Again, once again, high vibrational wellness, intuitive healing therapies to nourish your body temple. CIFTofficial.com is the website. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, folks. We're talking with Sevante. She is the food oracle. And I made one of my dear friends laugh very, very hard when she wanted to send me, wanted me to have her, she wanted my mailing address so that she could send me up on her passing boxes and boxes of cassette tapes of interviews she had done over her career. And she says, so how do you want me to address this? You know, I says, well, I kind of like Oracle. And she just burst out laughing. I just thought that was like, oh, wow, I really made her laugh. But you, how did you get the Food Oracle title?
Thanks for that question. You know, when I was thinking about all the teachings that were pouring into me, I think I told you that I have a science background in food science and dietetics. So there's this food nerd side. I became an advanced food healing instructor, teacher, all these things. But then I also have the spiritual side to me. I grew up with tarot and oracle cards. That's always been a very significant part of my life, is an esoteric channel reading for people, myself and my family. And then marrying those two together became such an important way of being able to bring this consciousness of food into the world. And it could have been a documentary, and I come from a film background, and it could have been a book. And so the guidance was to turn it into an oracle deck and allow people to be their own teachers. If I'm teaching intuitive food therapy, and oracle cards are all about intuition and pulling that card and letting the universe show you, why not let it be about food and let that food speak to you? And not just about, you know, should I take the job, or should I go on this particular diet, or should I, you know, get the Lamborghini or whatever it is. It could be, what does my body need in this now moment? What can I do to get out of this depression? What would make my sacral chakra start to hum a little bit better? You know, we provide so many different ways with these cards. And so hence the name, The Food Oracle, came from the fact that this book, this deck, which is now in about 35 countries and has been the basis of 8 more books. I wrote a book on top exotic foods for natural healing, and just a myriad of a cookbook and smoothie book. But they all stem from the idea that food has a message, and spirit has a message to give you in your what's on your dinner plate. And so these are oracle messages. And so the oracle deck is the basis of the teachings that have been now several books later. So yeah, so
Mm.
that's really how it became the food oracle, and it kind of stuck. And so now there started off 5 years ago, we were at one deck, and now I'm at we did a second, and now I'm writing a third one.
Mm.
People wanted more food. I couldn't believe. I thought 60 foods was a lot of foods to talk about, the food and the word and the oracle meaning and the practical gifts, which is all the nutrition. And then I kept getting calls. Have you thought of this food? Or chef, I'm creating an intentional meal using your deck. Oh my God, that's like the greatest thing I wanted to hear. And more chefs were calling me, can you do more foods? So then another 60 foods came out, and then now there'll be another 40. So yeah, we're almost at, right now we're at 124 foods that have been brought together in a way that provide you everything you could possibly know. But when you go to the store and you want to have Brussels sprouts, or you're craving, peaches, why am I craving that? What is that telling me in this now moment? Not tomorrow or last week. More often than not, people will tell me when they have had a card pulled for them that they A, were either craving that, or B, just bought it at the store that night before, or they are working on that healing word. So
Mm.
I've seen it thousands and thousands of times in my food oracle readings.
Yeah. I find it interesting too that when we are talking about the aspect of the total body, the holistic, if you will, as some people will use that term, that we forget, or maybe we don't even know. It's part of what I talk about on this program. We talk about giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true. And a lot of
Mhm.
times people don't even know what choices they have, which is part of the problem. That it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just, are you willing to open your mind to the possibility that, and so forth. And I happen to sort of moderate or co-host a program dealing with our local farmers markets. And
Mhm.
the host picks three different foods each week that we talk about. And then he will make something from one, two, or all three of them, a recipe.
I love that.
Well, one of the most amazing things to me is that he comes up with the most incredible foods that I'd never heard of before. And I think that when I start watching a lot of these cooking shows, whether it's who's the British guy? Can't think of his name off the top of my head. Anyway, we've
Gordon Ramsay?
thank you, Gordon Ramsay. And you start having introduced into the food stock, if you will, the foods that are available for making whatever. They will throw in something that we would consider, wow, that's exotic. I've never heard of that before. And yet in
Yes.
other parts of the world, it's the mainstay. That's part of their diet. And I keep wondering too about that, because it brings to mind a woman I met many years ago, a different woman this time, and I wish I could remember the woman's name, but she was referred to as the wild weed woman. And she created this deck of 52 cards, and they were actually no bigger than a standard playing card, with a hole punched in it with a ring holding them all together that you could easily flip through, so they all stayed together. And what it was a series of cards of plants that most of us would say are weeds, when
Yes.
in fact they're nutritious. Now, her simple story is that she was watching the aftermath, if you will, or maybe it was during that period of time of the first Gulf War back in the early 90s. And she saw this family, Middle Eastern family, sitting on the side of the road, kneeling, and they were kneeling on these plants. And of course, they were looking and asking for food, asking for help. They were starving, they were hungry and so forth. And she recognized the plant they were kneeling on. And she recognized it and realized, oh my God, right at their knees is more nutrition than they could ever possibly know.
Wow.
One of the cards in her deck was, and I don't recall the name of the plant, but we refer to it, especially in Arizona and the Southwest, when it dries out, as a tumbleweed. And I worked at a transmitter site in Phoenix, actually west of Phoenix. And we had some of these plants growing in the field where the radio tower was. And they were green. And I remember reading the card, and it suggests, here's what you do: you cut off the last 2 or 3 or 4 inches from the end of the tip of each of the sprouts, and you put that in water and you boil it or you heat it up, what have you, and then you mix it with potatoes or whatever else you want, and it's very nutritious. And I actually tried that. Now, at that time, those cuttings were very soft. And so it seems to me that there are a lot of things that are edible. Isn't the term wilding that comes to mind, where you go into the forest or you go into a wilderness area to forage for stuff?
Well, like dandelions, people think, oh, it's just a wonderful little weed out there, right?
Yeah.
You're making a wish on, it actually is our wish card. But dandelion greens are so incredibly good for you.
Mm.
And I I thought about all the different people who would write to me and ask me about not wild plants, but wild fruits or things that they've heard of. Let's just take, for example, bitter melon
Mm-hmm.
or sour sop or moringa, which I believe all three of those are starting to have more of a mainstream um, awareness than they've ever had. But when I introduced them, and that was part of the education of creating the Oracle deck, was to allow people to see that other people are using this as their daily medicine. And
Mm.
so I wrote Top Exotic Foods for Natural Healing. I took 10 of the most exotic foods, durian, huge, huge, huge in Asia, and some of these other exotics. And I took 10 of my favorites from the ones that I had studied, and I put them in this little, I call it a little healing handbook. And not only did I just say, here's what it is, here's what it helps, whether it's diabetes or cholesterol or any of the different ailments that they're cancer, huge soursop is a cancer crusher, as they say. I then studied and presented in the book easily, it's not very nerdy, but excerpts from National Institute of Health studies. So I put NIH studies of how they're using bitter melon to fight diabetes, how they're using soursop for cancer treatments. And so you are seeing these amazing foods. Some of them look crazy, some of them smell horrible, like durian, but there's so much that Mother Nature wants to allow us to know. And so this
Mm.
little handbook, it's like 60 pages. You can read it in a very short time, but
Mm.
my goodness, sure will want to make you want to get one of those 10 items in there. What's a Buddha's hand? And, read about it and see that there is so much, maybe in your local grocery store, maybe in your Asian markets, maybe on Amazon, or maybe you can even actually grow it at your house. Surprisingly, moringa, which is called the miracle tree in countries all over the world, is so good for you for 10 reasons. And a lot of these things I write about on my blogs. They're free, they're on my website. I wrote the miracle moringa and why we're so grateful of it, and the miracle of soursop. And so, yeah, it's amazing when we realize that less is best. And there's a lot of food out there, particularly, outside the US, these islands. That's how they didn't have the pharmacies. They don't have the modern technologies as a lot of us have here. This is how they are healing or keeping their bodies at their highest vibrational wellness in their respective countries and
Mm.
parts of the world. So, yeah, I wanted to bring that here.
Sevante is my guest, the Food Oracle. The book is entitled, the latest book, I should say. We'll talk about our library shortly. High Vibrational Wellness intuitive healing therapies to nourish your body temple. CIFT official.com is the website that stands for, and also the website too is Center for Intuitive foodtherapy.com. We will be linked to that as well, and we hope that you will check out the work that she is doing as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are talking with Sevante, the food oracle. I want to ask you about your library. I've been kicked out of, I was kicked out of the high school library for being too loud. But this library, I don't think I'd be kicked out of. You have quite a number of books, including obviously this latest work, High Vibrational Wellness. Talk to us about your sojourn into authorship. I joined that club last month, as a matter of fact. I'm real excited about that. So,
Fantastic.
yeah. So tell us how you joined the Authors Guild.
Honestly, completely by accident. It probably must have been 15, let's just say 15 or 20 years ago, somewhere in there. I just woke up in the middle of the night and really I listened to my intuition. It said, write this down. And I just got out my computer and started typing. And it ended up being a children's book. My first writing into the world of authorship was called Finn's Giant Leap. And it ended up being a little story about consciousness for young adults or young children, rather. Actually, people of all ages have loved this book. And it was just about how to believe in yourself. And it was all sorts of positive messaging. And this little Finn went on an adventure and got into some trouble and then got the help of, whether it's a fairy or an angel, but he gets some help. But anyways, I started reading, I wrote Finn's Giant Leap and did all sorts of book signings with little 4 and 5 and 6, 7-year-olds and thought that was really fun. And then it wasn't until years later, I actually, my husband's a music producer and I had a series of meditation albums. He set me up with a little boutique spiritual record label called Intuitive Wisdom. We came out with Gulf Coast Meditations, and it was sort of like the book High Vibrational Wellness, where I had a collaborative project where I took 10 authors and meditations and they recorded them. So I started doing the albums for a while. And then I moved back into writing. And so the Food Healing Oracle deck kind of got things started. That was about 5 years ago. Then a second deck. And then I realized when people want, sort of like what you were saying with the farmer's market and the chef and providing ways to, here's the food, now what?
Mm-hmm.
We said, here's what this food is, here's what the food means in the Oracle deck. Now let me create you a smoothie. So you can have the prosperity smoothie or releasing grief smoothie. And it's all based on foods and cards from the deck. So the smoothies beyond the nourishing wisdom, beyond the blend came out. And now people had a way to utilize the food. I'm actually writing one that was smoothies. Now I'm doing one for juicing because they're a little different. And some people prefer one or the other. So juicing is one. And then the top exotic foods. And it just kind of has gone from there. And I love to work with the archangelic realm, and they actually, if you are very tuned into the higher realms with angels, they actually have food protocols. And so that's going to be in a future book too. So one thing has led to another, and none of it's been planned at all. But I'm very glad to be the steward of this particular work because everybody in the world eats. I would never have dreamed when I was like, let's marry spirit and science of food, that this little Oracle deck would go to be all over the world. I mean, we're approaching 40 countries now, and it's just been a mind blower for me. So it's created the legacy now of the future, all these books that have been coming out, but they all tie in together, as well as you mentioned Nourish Your SoulRetreats. I take people to exotic locations all over the world where people can experience getting an oracle reading. They can experience walking through a land that has medicinal herbs, and you walk around and see what that plant is. I take you on that, and cooking classes, and really give you the mind, body, spirit, the nourish your soul on all level experience for most of them are about a week. We have a mini retreat coming up, but most are we have one in Costa Rica next year, and Taos, New Mexico, and India and Nepal. We'll be going back there again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you have got your hand into a lot of different, as they say, pies. I love the concept of planning, the old saying, we make plans and God laughs. And I've had that happen on more occasions than I care to count,
Yeah,
where
with
I had
you.
this, I had this whole plan set up, and I get this intuitive prompting saying, you need to go this way. It would be better for you to go this way, go this way. And the story I tell of bicycling to work one day, and I go a half a mile past where I was prompted to turn, and it wouldn't go away. I ended up turning around, going back the half mile, and then going the detour, if you will, the intuitive detour, and back on the path that I was on. And I have no idea, other than all my intuition was doing was saying, look, are you really serious about listening to and following the promptings? All right. If you're serious, then you got to do this. And I don't know, because a lot of people will say, well, maybe you avoided an accident. Maybe you avoided getting hit by a car down further, and so on and so on and so on. I have no idea. You know, all I know is that you get to a point where, if you're going to, and I say this lightly, because I don't mean this to come across harsh, but if you're going to listen, if you're not going to follow the promptings, why bother listening? You know?
So true. I love that.
And I've said many times on this program that when asked, sometimes pre-interview, do you have any questions you could send? No, I have no idea what I'm going to ask. The universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride.
Yes.
And so it's been fascinating. Sevante's my guest, the food oracle. The book is entitled High Vibrational Wellness. And we also have the website of Center for Intuitive Food Therapy.com or CIFTofficial.com. We encourage you to go there as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're with Sevante, and we're talking about a lot of areas dealing with this issue of um, food and drink, if you will. I want to talk about cycles. Now, we have seasons, and we have, setting aside any natural disasters, Mother Nature saying, hey, get out of the way. I got to bring this through. For whatever reason, and a lot of times we don't know the reason, but there is one, and maybe if we tap into our intuition, we might get the answer for ourselves. But there are seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. And there are different foods that are grown during those seasons in different parts of the world. That's one of the beautiful things about the farmers markets. And I'll focus on those more so than the grocery stores.
Mm.
That there is a turnover. Matter of fact, that's one of the subjects that we talk about every week. Okay, well, we're here in the middle of fall, and we're heading towards certainly the holidays and this and that and the other. What are we going to be looking for? Because now the cherries are gone and the strawberries are gone, and then that's not there anymore because we've already harvested, and so on and so forth. And there's a reason why, isn't there? There's a reason why, not that we have the seasons, but there is this cyclical process because our human bodies are, I've used this analogy, where our bodies are like filters, and that as we consume different things, the body filters through those things that we need from those elements that are provided during a particular season, that sort of prepare us for the next season and the next item that we consume, that is then filtered through to provide us with what we need, and so forth. And then that combination is built upon the next season and the next season, and so forth. And we go around the calendar as we've created, and so forth. So talk to us about the importance of, I guess the term would be, eating seasonally rather than having bananas 12, if you were, bananas 12 months out of the year.
I love that. That's a great question. And my passion for nature and eating already according to earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. And it's very much in alignment with Ayurvedic principles, which is all about nature, which is all about eating foods that are in your dosha or your particular cosmology, along with the foods that are current. I also relate it to an energetic and a frequency. I look at fall as an inward time. Things are getting darker earlier.
Mm.
It's more of a time to go in and reflect and ground, if you will. And I look at those holidays that are in the fall, winter time, and it's more about that Thanksgiving and that, what matters most, no matter what religion you're in. If you're Jewish, it's the high holidays of the New Year, and it's mainstream, it's the New Year. And so it doesn't surprise me that the foods related to each part of the season also reflect that. In the Food Healing Oracle deck, let's just take the color orange, a very fall color. So we have sweet potatoes, which is our comfort card. We have butternut squash, which is our support card. You have foods that are deeply rooted, beets for grounding, carrots are our empowerment. It's this time of that. And then when you move into sort of like spring, it's everything's blooming. We're blooming. We're letting go of the old. We're releasing, we're clearing, we're expanding. The flowers, everything's coming more into the light. And so we are becoming lighter. We're more being seen. And so there is a frequency and an energy that goes with the seasons, with nature, with the foods, with the colors. It's all tied in. It's all tied in. And I love when you can be more intuitive about hearing sort of the body's natural biorhythm, craving certain things, and start to understand, well, wow, I need something a little bit heavier. I need to kind of, you know, move a little bit more hermit. If you were a tarot card
Mhm.
reader, it's the hermit time versus on that hero's journey where you're going out into the world and seeing what there is to see. It's that sort of philosophy. Hope
Mm.
that explains it a little bit, at least from my point of view.
Well, and again, I take a look at it from whether you want to recognize a creator who has set this whole cycle up, or it's just Mother Nature.
Mhm.
There's a reason why we have the seasons, and there's a reason why we grow different things at different times of the year, because we need different things at different times of the year.
Yeah.
I would venture that those things that are grown in the spring and early summer help us to go through the increased daylight. And
Yeah.
we also need that too, because they say we get vitamin D from the sunshine. We need that. And then in the fall and winter, as you just described, those different foods, they help us get through the colder periods of time. And it seems as though unfortunately on a larger scale we've kind of lost that, because we've gone to this whole corporate farming thing. What do And I would take it that that intuition is going to be a real critical element in someone's life if they live in an extremely urban center. Well, oh, I don't know, like New York City, where they live in a high rise and you can't really have a garden unless you get permission to maybe have it even on your balcony, or if you have one, or on the roof. I've known that there have been some buildings that will allow them to start putting gardens on the roof, which is
There's
fantastic.
also the hydroponics. There's lights. People I've known have
Oh, that's
set up a
right.
little
Yeah.
table inside and created their own herb garden and using, lighting. There's lots of different ways to do that.
Yeah.
And if you want to go that, take those efforts, I think they're worth it.
Hmm.
I know there's a lot of modern conveniences, but clicking a button and getting something sent to you overnight, and you can do that too, as
Sure.
long as you look for something that is as close to nature as possible,
Yeah.
organic, pesticide free, hasn't been processed 10 different ways to Sunday before it even gets to you, because that just kind of degrades the bioavailability of the food the more
Yeah.
it is further away from you.
And I think that if you can find a farmer's market in your area, no matter where you live, not only in the country, but anywhere around the world, and I don't think that the US is the first to come up with these. I think that they've been around for a long, long time around the world. I think of like some of these markets, whether it's the Middle East or even in Europe, some of the European cities and towns and so forth, where the farmers will bring their wares in. And you see this in a lot of television movies that you've got these wonderful, and the colors. That was one of the things that always strikes me when I walk through our farmers markets, is the vibrant colors, especially the greens. An interesting side note on green, that in bars and lounges, red is the predominant color because it makes you more thirsty, supposedly. But also, I've noticed too that certain colors, if you stare into them and then you look away, then you have, I don't know if it's necessarily the opposite color that you still see, as a hue in your eye until it eventually dissipates. And there's one color that I've noticed, and I've tried this many times, that does not create that effect. And it's green. You can stare at green for a long time, look away, and you don't get that opposite hue color, if you will. Have no
That's
idea.
amazing. I'm just thinking about how green, for me, I was thinking about the heart chakra when you were saying that. And green is, of course, the color of healing.
Yeah.
It's such a strong color. Green's a color of money. Green has a lot of wonderful connotations. I was visiting my daughter in Australia, and she's actually a chef down under in Tasmania. And she said to me, Mom, you're just not going to believe the farmers markets here. It's almost like a ceremony, the way there's such reverence for the food. And I mean, it was just the highlight, like the big Sunday I get there and she's like, we're going to the farmer's market. And it was the best farmer's market I've ever been to. And then I'm noticing everyone's selling Manuka honey, which is so good for you. It's the medicinal grade. And I'm realizing, oh my God, this is where it's made. I'm, buying all the jars and bringing it back to the States here. But it was so nice to see how the Australians at this farmers market were just so in honor and reverence to what they've created on their lands. It was very inspiring.
You just opened up another door here, because, and I'll touch upon this before we wrap up here. The importance of reverence. I'm a big proponent, and I love the ritual and the ceremony tradition. Born and raised Catholic, so was steeped in that, going to mass and all of the different rituals surrounding that, whether it be being born and baptized or whether it being buried. You have the ceremony in that regard, or a wedding, or any of the other sacraments that they have. And I've noticed too, when it comes to not just plants, but also animals, and I've seen this on a number of programs where they'll go out and they're hunting, and they will get their kill, but they will then spend the time showing respect, being grateful and thankful for
Yes.
the gift that this animal has given to help them to sustain their lives. And I don't think that it's any less important to do when you're talking about plants. A scientist by the name of Jagadish Chandra Bose, I read about in Autobiography of a Yogi, who created
Mm-hmm.
the crescograph that was able to measure what's called the turgor pressure, the equivalent of our blood pressure, when a plant had chloroform applied to it, brought near, and then moved away. And there was a reaction shown by the crescograph. So it goes to show that plants also are, not only are they alive, but they're, I guess we could go as far as saying that they're conscious,
Conscious.
they're sentient.
Yes.
And of course, I took that to the next level with vegans saying, okay, You don't want to kill animals and have animal byproducts because you don't want to perpetuate the killing and so on and so forth of these living beings. Now that you know about plants, now what are you going to do? You know,
Mhm.
I'd become a breatharian, which is one who just sustains their life by breathing. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm sure that there are some sages and yogis and avatars that do that. I'm not there yet, but
Hey, I'm going to find out. I'm going to Nepal tomorrow.
please do, please do. But honoring, I think that it goes a long way to show the respect to the plant, to the growing things coming out of Mother Earth, to say thank you for providing this for my sustenance, sustaining my life, for my nourishment, and so forth.
I always believe wholeheartedly, 1,000 million, and you'll see this in an upcoming writing, how important it is to give back to what's been provided for us with gratitude, with appreciation, and as we mentioned the word before, with reverence.
Mm.
And whether you eat meat, whether you don't eat meat, no matter how the food got there, it was grown for you. Thank you for the sunlight that provided the
Mm.
ability for that
Mm-hmm.
plant to grow. And to really look at, there's so many pieces of the puzzle, or, elements that took to get there. It's not just the seeds. It's the seeds had to go into the soil. The soil had to communicate with the seeds, and then it had to work with the water. It work with all the elements. I mean, there's a lot of different um, parts to how that food got on your plate, in addition to giving yourself care and love and kindness of how you've created or presented it or decided to do what you do with the food. Make sure you do that and thank yourself as well, that you have created something, because there's something to be said. We're not just giving, we have to receive also. And take in, like, wow, I've created something, I've worked. It's almost like collaborating with the divine. You've been provided this food, and now you are taking it and working with it to now provide for others. It can go on, but if you just took that moment to sit back and really take in the bigger picture, and that, to me, just for summing up this interview, is what high vibrational wellness is all about, is the wellness of all related to ourselves, to our community, to the planet.
I think of the phrase, don't try to control the process, become part of the process. And that
Yes.
holds true with everything that you've talked about here on the program today. It really
Uh,
does.
yeah.
Sevante is my guest, the food oracle, the book High Vibrational Wellness. It's intuitive healing therapy to nourish your body temple. And Center for Intuitive Food Therapy.com is the website, CIFT official.com. And this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we have Sevante with us. We're going to wrap things up here and ask you three final questions I ask all of my guests as we come to the close of this particular program. We look forward to having you back, obviously, to talk about your latest book, Beyond High Vibrational Wellness. But before I ask those three final questions, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Oh, don't forget about the Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. edition of Tell Me Your Story, following the news, also streaming at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry. We're on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. And we hope you'll subscribe and click notifications so when I post a new conversation, you'll be notified. We also want to remind you that the book Choices is out. It's available on Amazon. The Audible is coming. It's currently hardback, paperback, as well as Kindle. So Amazon.com, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. I hope you'll get yourself a copy. We ask that if you can support the work that we're doing financially, we have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And we also ask that you spend some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and spend some time in that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place, listening to that still small voice, that intuitive guide that has been there and is there for you. It will challenge, but it will never put you in harm's way. I can attest to that in my own life experience. With all of that being said, we ask our final three questions of our very special guest, and the first of those questions, and I'm going to go with this particular derivation there. Who is Sevante?
Perfect to ask me that. My born birth name was Lainie Sue, and Sevante came in actually in 2009. I'll be brief, but it was kind of like this, almost like God was in the car and said, "You are Sevante." So, who is Sevante? Well, it turns out that Sevante means worship in Sanskrit. It's a derivative of seva, selfless service to others, and savant is a wisdom teacher. So I took sort of those three embodiments, and that is Sevante. That is who I am.
What gets you up in the morning?
Is the ability to see how I may serve humanity. And I do believe I've been given a course that's very unique, and I feel so grateful and blessed that this uniqueness, this food oracle world, was gifted to me to be able to bring it forward. Another unplanned, but what gets me up in the morning is the ability that people are receiving and having transformational experiences by the teachings.
And finally, what was your best day?
I've had many of them. My best day just recently is surviving another natural disaster and still being here. But every day that I'm here, that I can do the work that I'm meant to be doing, following my Dharma and having conversations is another best day. So I look forward to having many best days like this one right now.
Well, Sevante, I want to thank you again for joining us here on the program, and we look forward to having you back again to talk about the work that you continue to do, and then your next book, and so forth and so on. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I loved it.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.